The project support plans. These are the support processes that we have in our project, and they are 5, and we also need to develop plans to manage those areas. Those areas are team, stakeholder, information, risk, and contracts. In this presentation, we're going to focus on team and stakeholder management plans. The team management plan is a plan to develop the project team and convert it from a group to a team. That means we are going to have a development plan, we're going to have a responsibility assignment matrix, and a resource histogram. Converting the group into a team means identifying the skill gaps and areas for development, both hard and soft skills. That is a conversation that the project manager has with the team, and identifies some of those training areas that the team needs in order to be competitive in the project, meaning that they have to have the skills, they need to be efficient, to be in a level where their competencies meet the demands of the project. Not all teams that come to the project have all the skills you need. That is a reality. But what is important is that you spend the time early enough in the project to build those skills. Whether they are internal training or external training opportunities, you need to have a plan to develop the skills of your team. That also means I need to have a budget. It is a concept that many project managers find hard time to identify the sources of the funding. But being creative about how you use it, there may be some sources within the organization or opportunities where somebody within the organization can provide training to your team. What is important is that identify how much money or how many funds are going to be needed to build the skills of your project. Then you're going to be developing some development activities, exercises in your team to build that level of coordination that is needed, and some development targets, meaning that as a team, the project will identify and agree on some of those development targets. When you start looking at your plan, one of the things that you need to understand is that where they are right now. You can identify specific areas that are needed on the project. For example, it could be communication, levels of collaboration, monitoring, levels of how people are going to be coordinating the work, how they share responsibility, or even skills on problem solving. You can have a survey, you can develop some assessment tools, and you identify your baseline. This is where the team is right now. You can have that as a whole, the team, or even as each individual member of your team. And then, based on the roles of that person in the team and the needs of the project, you identify the targets. So those targets is something that you also agree with your team, and you make sure that everybody aims to achieve those targets. And you give them a specified amount of time, depending on the size of your project, in which they're going to be able to build that skill. They're going to be able to be competent in terms of managing communications in the level of collaboration or the use of problem-solving tools. The idea is that they understand that they have to improve. There are areas in which they need to be more competent in order to be effective in the project. And having that conversation and development plans is a way to get also moving and transforming your group into a team. An important tool that we use to do that is the responsibility assignment matrix. For each one of the WBS activities that you have, you're going to have different people in your team, and each one of them is going to be assigned a specific role within those activities. The most important one is the who is responsible. Each activity in the project has to have one person responsible for that activity, either responsible for doing the work, or responsible for monitoring, or responsible for supervising the work of third parties like consultants or vendors. But there's only one person responsible. It's not 2 or 3. There's always one. The same for each one of the activities. There has to be one person who is authorizing that activity. Mostly it will be the project manager or a technical manager, but that's a person who has the level of control and makes sure that the activity is completed according to the quality requirements. And that creates, and also only one person. You cannot have two people accountable. That ideally is to have only one person who is going to be authorizing that work. The idea behind that is that you have a control process. It's a quality process to make sure that if somebody is responsible for the activity, somebody is going to be supervising or monitoring that activity is done according to the quality. The other roles that you have in the matrix are that can be assigned to other people is that they are going to be cooperating or they're going to be contributing with some information or some work. So you can have other people with that role. And the other one is being informed. Whatever is happening in the activity, if that person is responsible for doing it, then it has to identify the people who need to be informed. That means that they're going to be getting some reports or information about the progress on activity. Not everybody needs to be in every role. So we can see here that there's some areas that the people are not necessarily need to be involved in that activity, and that is okay. You don't need to complete that for everybody, but the rule is that each activity has to have one person responsible and one person that authorizes. With that information, we're going to start developing also the resource histograms. Once you start assigning people to the project, you're going to start finding that at each month you're going to start adding the totals of those assignments, meaning people are going to be working on each activity full-time or part-time, but you start adding up all that time. The idea is that the histogram helps you identify where you have situations where you're assigning a person more time than they can actually work on the project. If the average will be that you spend 80 hours per month or 160 hours per month, then if you're above that level, then there is no way that somebody can work more time than they are assigned, and that is a problem. And that means that either you need to assign more people to that activity or identify if you really need that much hours on that activity. The estimates could have been wrong, but most of the time is that maybe you need to spend that time. Maybe that activity doesn't need to take 2 months, maybe it takes 2.5 months, and you need to spread that time into the next month. The idea behind all of this is that if you assign somebody to do more work, they're not going to be able to do it. And the quality is going to suffer, the project is going to get delayed, motivation is going to be down, and make sure that situations like this don't happen. So you can use basic tools to help you identify how much time you have in a month for each person, how much time you're assigning them, looking at the schedule on your project, and then looking at if the person is being over-assigned to that activity and you don't have any problems with later on the project. The next plan is the stakeholder management plan. This is where we identify, analyze, and develop the strategies to improve the relationships with the various project stakeholders. We're going to plan based on the use of a plan levels of interest and influence and develop a plan to build and maintain those relationships. One of the first tools that we do is we use the interest and influence matrix. We identify, the whole team helps identify all the key stakeholders, and we rank each one of them based on the level of influence and the level of interest that they have, whether it's low, medium, or high. Each one of these stakeholders will be ranked in this matrix. You can even include the type of influence and the type of interest. What we do with this information is that we try to identify them and put them in these 4 categories. So a donor will have a high influence and a high interest, and it will go in category A. Somebody, here's another example, somebody with low influence and high interest will be in category C. Somebody with high influence and medium interest would be in category B. The idea of placing these categories is that it helps you identify the type of strategies you need to manage the relationships. And for that, we use this other matrix where we map levels of influence and levels of interest, and we have all those four categories. The first one, where you have your donor, the strategy is to manage closely, meaning that you provide information, you provide the reports, the donor needs certain requirements in terms of information from their project, and you need to manage that. There is the second group, keep satisfied. This is the group B. Notice that they are people with lower interest. They might be having high levels of influence in the project, but their interest is not that high. And the idea is that you need to build their interest. You need to be able to move their interest and make them more aware about the benefits of the project. You might need certain inputs or resources from these stakeholders. You might need their participation at one moment in the project, but if they have low interest, they might not be willing to participate as easily as you might need them. So it's important to build that relationship, satisfy their needs and understanding about the project. They might not be aware about what the project is and what are the benefits of the project, so you need to build that relationship and build that interest on them. The other group is you keep the group C, you keep them informed. Notice that the level of influence is not that high, so you don't need to spend much time, but you keep them informed with regular reports or information about the project. And the last one is the group D. That is the group that you don't need to spend much time. The only thing you need to do is to monitor for any changes, because these groups during the life of the project can change both in their levels of influence and interest. You can change their levels of interest, but you have a little impact in the level of influence they have on the project. And you have to monitor that. You have to monitor whether or not these groups are changing during the life of the project. So once you have your plan, how you're going to manage your stakeholders, how you're going to manage the relationships on a regular basis, try to review your matrix, try to review if there are any changes on your stakeholders. Here's another plan in terms of what you need to do for some of the key stakeholders, especially those that you need to change their view or their level of interest in the project. We can have one stakeholder who's completely unaware about what the project is and maybe never got the information it needed or didn't have the time to get informed about what the project is. And this is a key stakeholder. In your project, there's going to be a moment where you need this stakeholder to be supportive. So you identify the desired position of where you want this stakeholder to be. So that is basically how you start looking at the different positions that you have in your stakeholders. There might be some stakeholders who are resistant, and they might be resistant because they have the wrong information about the project or they don't have a good understanding, and you will need them to be supportive. Some of them might be neutral, they didn't have enough time to do, but you need them to be leading, meaning that they need to start taking an active role in the project. And that's how you identify those key stakeholders and you identify where you want them. And you use this tool to monitor how they start moving and how they start changing their attitudes about the project. And eventually they go to a role in which they are supportive or they start leading and taking an active role in the project. Like all of these tools, both in the team management and stakeholder management plan, they become the basis for monitoring the progress you make in both building your team and then building the relationship with your stakeholders.